Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. So this is actually my second time recording this video. I recorded it last weekend as well when I recorded some other stuff, and I've just got to learn that when I'm tired, there's no point in me recording because I'm just tripping over my words and I've got to edit extra stuff. So I just deleted the whole thing and we're going to start over. So today we're going to go through my April wrap up. So if you've been following old school April, which of course I've talked about a lot on the channel, I'll leave Kelsi's information linked down below. So Kelsi over at Slime and Slashers did this fantastic theme for April where she called it Old School April, where you would watch and read things that were pre-2002, I believe she put on there. To me, old school and retro and nostalgia is anything that's kind of pre-2000s. So I managed to read some books. Unfortunately, they were not from that era, and I was in a massive reading slump as well. I've talked about that on the channel also, that I was in a massive reading slump for like weeks and weeks and weeks that went kind of from the end of March into April. But the books that I did read were retro inspired, I guess we'll say. So the first book that I read was Scream Queen by Stephanie Sparks, and if you've been watching my channel for a while, you would have seen that I just did a review of that book as well. I'll have it linked down below for you guys. So this was the book that actually snapped me out of that reading slump. I was so grateful to finally pick up something that vibed with me and that really had me hooked in. This was a short piece of fiction. I believe it was just about 140 pages or 160 pages or so, and it takes place in the 1980s. So if you'd like to learn more, like I said, I'll have the link down below to my review and I go over kind of what it's about and what I liked about it. But this is set in the 1980s, which was great. So it really fit in with that whole old school April theme, even though it didn't really take place, like it wasn't written during that period, but it took place during that period. So it was really, really great. And somebody on that video suggested that I check out the new Nancy Drew series through Amazon Prime. And I'm really enjoying that as well. So that very much loops into this whole prom queen sort of mystery. And so if you haven't checked out the Nancy Drew series, I highly recommend that you do if you're into kind of those YA thriller type shows. So Scream Queen was a 5-star read for me. Please pick up Stephanie Sparks' work. I've really enjoyed everything that I've read from her so far. I also read Kill the Babysitter last year, and it was on my top reads of 2021. And then earlier this year, I also read The Stepchildren by her, and that one was great as well. So please check out Stephanie Sparks' work. Scream Queen in particular was really, really great. So that kind of snapped me out of my slump, and then I went back to the audiobook that I was reading, which was the Beastie Boys book, and I really, really enjoyed this one as well. I just finished it recently here a few days ago, and it was just a really great book to learn a little bit more about a band that was so instrumental in my upbringing. So I remember that my older brother, who's 10 years older than me, had their License to Ill cassette tape. And I remember being very, very young, like maybe 5 years old, and I would go steal that cassette tape, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So it was great to learn about the band, how they formed, how they met, and just how young these guys were when they started their band and when they broke into the mainstream. And it goes through all of their dealings with famous producers that they dealt with during that time that worked with other rap stars and then other artists as well. They went on tour with Madonna. So it went through all of that, and I found myself just kind of smiling and laughing at some of the things. So this is a very light read. A lot of it, like in a lot of places, it was very kind of foolish, it was kind of silly, very lighthearted, and I didn't mind it at all. So nothing too deep here, which I think was great in kind of bringing me out of that slump as well. And one part that I really enjoyed in this book was where they talked about feminism and some of the content that they had back then in the 80s. A lot of their music in some places was very misogynistic. I mean, you have the song Girls from the License to Ill album, and even though it's a really catchy song, when you listen to the lyrics. Of course, it's extremely misogynistic, and they did actually come out in the book and make an official apology that they are feminists. They do believe in women's rights. It was just, you know, part of the time. They were really young and all of that, which is, of course, is not an excuse, but it just kind of came out in part of the creative vision. But I really did appreciate that they came out and made an apology about some of the content that they had from back then. So that was really great to see. And then, of course, it's kind of sad, like when I got towards the end, it's kind of sad to know that they're never gonna produce any more music. Of course, after one of the band members died, just, what was it, maybe 10 years ago or so. And there's not going to be any revival. There's not going to be, you know, they're not going to get back together sort of thing. So that is kind of sad because, of course, right from way back, like I said, when I was 4 or 5 years old, right on up through to the early 2000s, you know, Beastie Boys was always part of my upbringing. So again, not a book that was written back during that time, but it had to do with a band from that time. So highly recommend the Beastie Boys book if you are a fan of the band. The only bad thing is that this book is very expensive. So I think Amazon, Book Depository, Indigo, all of those places, it was kind of between 40 and 60 bucks. Actually 40 and 65 bucks when I checked, and that's way too expensive for a book. And I'm not really too sure why the book is so expensive. The only thing that I can think is that the audiobook that I listened to, which it was a lot cheaper to download it from Audible because it cost 1 credit. But a lot of the people that narrated the different chapters of the book were very famous actors and rappers and stuff like that. And I would assume if they've got those kinds of people into this kind of thing, you know, they've got to cover their paychecks. So that's the only reason why I can see why this book is so expensive. But if you do want to read it, the cheapest way to get it is to download it off of Audible. So the last book, because like I said, I was in a huge slump, so I only read 3 books this month, plus one that's a bridge book that I'm actually still reading. But the last book that I read this month was Paperback Crush, The Totally Radical History of 80s and 90s Teen Fiction. So this is another nonfiction book, and it discusses all of those wonderful series from the 80s and 90s that we loved when we were growing up. So they talked about everything from, you know, The Babysitter's Club, Sweet Valley, Fear Street, R.L. Stine, Goosebumps, basically anything that came out during that period they discussed. And they discussed like the development of YA fiction during that time and how they worked in stuff from Asian writers and Black writers and kind of this evolution of just from white America to bringing in other characters and stuff like that. And I have to say that this book, I read it while I was out on my walks during lunchtime every afternoon. And the whole time I was reading it, I was just smiling. It was so nostalgic to hear about all of these series that you can remember from your childhood, but also ones that you've probably forgotten about, books that you've probably forgotten about, ones that you've never heard of before. And then it also talked about early YA fiction that was targeted at teen girls from the 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s as well. So this was a great piece of source material for those types of YA middle grade sort of series from that time. So anybody that was into that sort of thing, I would highly recommend reading this book. Like I said, I got it on audiobook as well, and it was fantastic. And if you have an Audible subscription, this is part of their free catalog. So I downloaded it for free. It didn't cost me any of my credits. So that was great. And the production quality was really good. The narrator is really good. The only thing that I regret, and I am going to go back and listen to this again, the only thing that I regret is I didn't have a pen and a piece of paper while I was reading this, because the series and the books and the authors and everything that they're talking about included ones that I've never heard of before. Like I said, they were talking about stuff from like the 50s and 60s, which is stuff that I'd want to keep an eye out for when I'm out book hunting. So for any collector or any lover of that period of kind of those YA series, definitely pick this one up. This one was a 5-star read for me as well. So 2 really great 5-star reads this month, and like I said, that helped to snap me right out of my reading slump, so that was great. So of course, because I wasn't reading a whole lot, I did fill up my time with a lot of movies, and I thought the old school April theme was right up my alley because I love retro movies and shows and all of that sort of thing. So I did start watching some old episodes of Goosebumps and Are You Afraid of the Dark? Of course, I was just in a collaboration with Kelsi and with a couple of other people that had to do with Are You Afraid of the Dark and giving book recommendations. So as part of my research for that, I was watching old episodes of Are You Afraid of the Dark, and that was really, really great. You can find complete episodes here on YouTube. Make sure you look it up now because who knows how long that's going to be up for. So that's really great, and really enjoyed my time rewatching a lot of those old episodes because Are You Afraid of the Dark was my favorite show when I was growing up. And the other show that I watched during this time was The Little Vampire, which is a German-Canadian TV show that's from, I believe it started in 1985 or 1987. And honestly, I swear to God, I'm the only person who watched this when I was growing up. Like, when I talk to other people, and like I said, this is a Canadian show and I am Canadian, and when I talk to other people, they're like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, nobody can remember this. So when I found the episodes, the full episodes on YouTube, I was so happy because I was like, okay, I'm not hallucinating this show. I'm not hallucinating it. It happened. It was on TV, and it was exactly how I remembered it. And it was fantastic. It had all of the wonderful Canadian charm and cheese and the bad production quality and everything. Look it up. It's really, really great. So this story is about a young boy named Anton, and he meets a vampire that's living in his local cemetery, and they start to hang out and get into all sorts of shenanigans. But of course, their friendship and the fact that Rudiger is a vampire has to remain secret. So, you know, he's trying to keep it from his family, and there's a really nosy neighbor who keeps putting her business in, or her nose in their business. And so lots of shenanigans, like I said, super cheesy, but it's really, really good. It was only ever on for one season. It's 13 episodes, and you can get the full episodes here on YouTube. So I will link the channel down below that has the episodes of that. And it also had all of the wonderful gothic fashion from that time, from the mid 80s as well. So it was just, it was so good. And my husband was like, what the hell are you watching? I was like, this is one of my favorite shows when I was growing up, and of course he had never heard of it before, so he's younger than me. So that was really great as well. So that was the shows that I watched, and jumping into some of the movies that I watched during this period. The first one, and I specifically went on Amazon and ordered this movie for Old School April. I was like, here's my excuse to buy this movie. It's called Troop Beverly Hills. I believe it's from 1988 or 1989, and it's about this young girl, and her family are really, really rich. They live in Beverly Hills, and she is part of like a Girl Scouts group, and her mother and father are in the midst of a divorce. So in order for her mother to kind of do a little bit of mother-daughter bonding, she is very much a socialite. She's, you know, she is like one of the celebrity kind of people. And she decides to become her daughter's Girl Scout leader of their troop. And it's just fantastic. It has all of the wonderful 80s fashion and just the charm and the nostalgia from that period. If you've never seen this movie, it's really, really good. I highly recommend picking this one up. I enjoyed it. I think Matthew enjoyed it as well. So really, really enjoyed this one. And like I said, now it's part of my own collection, so I can keep rewatching it for every single Old School April. And the next movie that we watch is actually one that I remember watching over and over from the 90s. When did this come out? 94, 95 sort of period. And Matthew said he can remember the movie, but he couldn't remember anything specifically from the movie. So I went ahead and ordered this one as well off of Amazon, and we had such a blast watching it. I'm not really into comedy a whole lot, but this movie is funny. It's really funny. So this is about an army major, and he gets kicked out of the regular army. But what they do is they put him on assignment at this military school, and he has to be the leader of this group of misfits at this military school, and they're like the worst military school around, and he has to whip them into shape for these military games. And it's hilarious. It's just the one-liners in this movie. Like, since we watched this, we've just been repeating one-liners for the past couple of weeks. It's hilarious. And I think this one's going to be part of the regular rotation of our watch list that we watch all the time. Like I said, I'm not into a whole lot of comedy, but this movie is really, really funny. And next up was Angus, which is a teen, like a 90s teen flick that I think is really underappreciated. Not a lot of people talk about this movie, not enough people talk about this movie. So this is about a kid, his name is Angus, and he's overweight, and he's really badly bullied by this group of jocks at school, and he's trying to get accepted into this really prestigious science school. He's really, really good at science and math and all of that sort of thing. He's really intelligent. And you know, but he also plays football and all of this in his school that he's in now. So as a joke, the group of jocks end up nominating him as prom king, and, you know, fix it so that he'll win. And the girl who's prom queen is the lead jock's girlfriend, but he's had a crush on her forever. So this whole thing, and it's fantastic. And it's got Kathy Bates plays his mother, and Kathy Bates is just such a gem to watch in just about everything that she's in. I just love her. And it has I forget the kid's name, but he plays the Shermanator in American Pie. He's in it, and it's just 90s gold. It really, really is. It's got all the comedy, all of the charm. It's sad in some places. Like, I was actually watching part of this movie, I won't give any spoilers, but I started crying, like sitting down on the couch crying. And all of a sudden I look over and Matt's like, oh my god, that's really sad, and he's crying. And it was this whole thing. So anyway, if you've never seen Angus and you really enjoy those 90s teen flicks, definitely pick this one up. It was really, really great. And then next up is a gem from my childhood. It's called Girls Just Want to Have Fun, and it's so good. I remember watching this over and over when I was younger. I had it on VHS. I don't own it anymore, but you can get it on Amazon Prime. And just the soundtrack of this movie, I believe it came out in '87. The soundtrack of this movie is so great. And then on top of that, you've got a young Sarah Jessica Parker, Helen Hunt, Jonathan Silverman, Shannon Doherty, and they're all teenagers. I believe Shannon Doherty is like 11 or 12 in this movie. So here we follow Sarah Jessica Parker's character, and she is starting at a new school. Her father is very stringent military, and they just moved to Chicago. And her favorite thing in the whole world is dance TV. And it's based in Chicago, and her and Helen Hunt's character are watching an episode, and they announce that they're going to be looking for new dancers. So they have these auditions that are going to be in the Chicago area, and of course this is her dream. She's always wanted to be on the show. And her dad says no. He's like, you're not allowed. We just moved to the city. Like I said, like strict military kind of. So of course she wants to do it anyway, so she starts sneaking out to go to these tryouts. She makes it into the finalists, and she has to keep trying to sneak out to get to all of these practices and stuff. And like I said, it has the wonderful villain, like the villain who's trying to win the show as well, and her dad is really rich and she's trying to get him to fix it so she'll win. And they're nemesis, of course. So it has the villain, it has the soundtrack, it has all of the fashion. So if you haven't seen this one, it's an all-time favorite of mine. If you're into kind of like dance movies and you like things with that sort of 80s charm and the soundtrack and the whole thing, I would highly recommend checking this one out. It's really, really good. It's a gem. And then I don't need to say really anything about this movie, or the next two movies actually. So next up we watched The Shining, and I haven't seen The Shining from beginning to end in several years. So it was really nice to sit down and just watch it from beginning to end. And The Shining is actually a book that I have to try to bump up the priority list so I can see it here fairly soon. I've never read it. I've heard that Stephen King wasn't overly pleased with how the movie came out, and it's quite a departure from Jack Nicholson's character and his unraveling and everything. But watching the movie was really, really fantastic. Like I said, I haven't seen it in quite a few years, so it was really good to sit down and watch that one from beginning to end. And the same thing with the next one on the list, which is what wrapped up Old School April. We watched the 70s version of the Amityville Horror. So I haven't seen this one for years and years and years and years. And Amityville, like I've said before, is very much like a pet project of mine. I love the story of Amityville, and I love all of it. I love the debate, I love the haunting, the murders, just whether it's a hoax or whether it's real, the investigations, everything, all of it. I love all of it. So I read the book earlier this year for the first time. I had never read the book. And like I said, it's been years and years since I saw the movie. And the movie is just so cheesy, and it could have been done so much better. Now that I know kind of the ins and outs and how the haunting went, and I like watching a lot of documentaries on the Amityville haunting. One of them in particular is called The Real Amityville Horror. You can get it here on YouTube, and it discusses kind of both sides. So it's not from a skeptic's point of view, and it's not from a believer's point of view. They talk about both sides of the argument, which, like I said, it's right up my alley. So that was fantastic to watch. And I was just on a podcast actually earlier this week, and I said that my one white whale sort of book would be to have a first edition and first printing of the Amityville Horror, and some other books in that collection as well, since it is such a love of mine. So rewatching that movie and just kind of having it as the wrap up to the whole Old School April idea was fantastic. So that's everything that I watched and read during this fantastic month. If you took part, let me know down below, and let me know if you read or watched anything that really sticks out in your mind. And I can't wait for this to become an annual tradition. So that's everything for me, you guys. I hope, like I said, if you took part, that you had a fantastic Old School April. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up, leave me a question or a comment down below, because you know I love chatting with you guys. But until next time, stay spooky, everybody. Bye.